Welcome to the Z Suite. It's good to have you all with us. If you've zigzagged your way to the top in services, then you're in the right place. My name's Jacob, and I'll be helping to keep today's session running well and on schedule. And we're all here for a conversation on all things M&A, how to sell, buy, and scale a consulting firm without breaking it. And we've got two guys here who have lived through both sides of the deal, both buying and selling. And you probably have the scales to show for it, right, guys? Mark, over to you for some introductions.
Thank you, Jacob. Welcome, everybody, and thanks for joining us on episode one. I'm Mark Orttung, and just a very quick background. I've zigged and zagged between consulting and software development throughout my whole career. Before joining Projectworks as CEO, I ran Nexient, which was a software outsourced development consultancy in the US, and grew that from about 200 people to about 1,100 and sold it to NTT Data in 2021. Over to you, Alan.
Thanks, Mark. Happy to be here. Certainly, zigzag. I love the tagline there because the short version. I have to pick a short version of my introduction because the zigzagging it can lead to long introductions, right? So the quick version is I'm currently the CEO of Koniag Capital, which is an organization focused on buying and holding technology services businesses between 5 and 15 million in EBITDA. Focused on finding mostly founders, but we could go with PE-backed as well, or venture-backed businesses that are eager to make an exit and looking for a place to put their business with a unique approach. And our unique approach really is about pragmatically situating businesses as either puzzle pieces or platform businesses and holding them for the long haul. As an Alaskan Native corporation, we buy and hold businesses forever. We have one outstanding business currently called Vervent. And we've held that business since 2012. And we're announcing the launch of a business we're starting from scratch. And I'll leave that as a teaser. And then we're actively working to buy businesses with a significant amount of money off of our balance sheet over the next several years to build up a very strong business focused on the commercial sector. Overall, Koniag's a billion-dollar business, and my job is to work with the team to focus on the private sector as a part of all that to get us to 2 billion. I've been a part of 4 buy-side transactions and 5 sell-side in my career, along with a couple of large company post acquisition integrations when I worked in the Fortune 500 side. So though Mark, I'm loath to call myself, you guys describe me as a legend or a heavyweight or something like that. You won't catch me saying that about myself. But I think I've got enough battle scars and the zigzags here to be helpful today to the audience.
Nice one.
Awesome.
It's great to have you both with us. So, folks, today's session will be in 3 parts with 10 minutes each. First, we're going to have a deep dive in buying and selling a firm. We might hear a little bit more about puzzle pieces and platforms from Alan, I think. Second, Mark and Alan are going to live workshop an M&A problem shared in advance by someone from our audience here, which will be really cool. And third, we'll open up for live Q&A from the audience with us. So as we go, pop any questions and reactions in the chat. Now, most of you I can see have already found that. A bunch of comments coming through, which is great. If you haven't seen it, it should be accessed via the icon at the bottom of your screen. We'll cover as many of those as we can. Any that we won't get to, we'll follow up with after the session. So let's dive in. First for you, Mark. So before you became CEO of Projectworks, you spent a decade at the software consultancy Nexient, which you sold. What one word best describes selling a consulting firm and why?
Great question. Yeah, I think I'd go with surreal. Just because when I took over Nexient, sort of the mission I was given was to grow it, scale it, and lead it to some kind of exit. And typically the best way to do that is to sell to a strategic buyer. So in my case, I'd been working on that for 7 years when it happened. And so it's kind of surreal that it's actually happening. There's also kind of the transaction itself. I think I spent most of my waking hours for the 6 months before the transaction happened, just trying to get it to happen. And as with all complicated deals, there are moments where You think you've lost it and the thing's going to not happen, and then you finally do get it to go. And then you've also got the surreal part of like, wow, we're now part of this giant company, and the world is about to change in a big way, and I don't really even know exactly what that is yet.
Mm.
So yeah. So anyway, surreal is where I'd land.
I like that. I didn't know what word you're going to give, but that's a good one. Alan, a similar question for you, but on the other end of the deal. So since leaving the consulting work and becoming CEO of Koniag Capital, you've been on the other end of the negotiations. What's the word that best describes buying a firm?
Uh, it's a cool question to have to answer, in a rule of three, trying to get it down to one is hard. But I would say personal.
Hmm.
It's personal. When we're out approaching founders, and I experienced this working for founders on the sell side, and certainly helping integrate companies that we would sell into strategics or PE or whatever. But on the buy side now, we're very sensitive to the fact that it's personal for the founder and that team. Um, if a founder has two children, this business is their third, right? So it's very personal to them and their team. And so if we don't approach it with that lens, with that empathy and understanding, we won't get anywhere in the conversation to understand their business more and build trust to persuade them to sell their business to us. And so I know that there are a couple of times where if we get off on the wrong foot and talking about the numbers too soon, we have shut down conversations and we learn from that. So it's personal.
I love that. I love that. When I think about M&A, just at a high level, people and personal and kind of emotional and relational experiences aren't the things that come to mind. So it's a refreshing perspective. So obviously we saw in the poll, there's a few people who are actively in the process of selling a firm or looking to sell a firm. Question for both of you, Mark and Alan, what's the first thing that they should be doing as they're getting started on that journey or in the throes of it? What's the first thing that comes to mind?
Yeah, for me, I think if they're getting close to it, I would say the one thing they should do is have a really crisp understanding with themselves as to why. Like, and it's maybe two different ways. Why am I selling? Why do we think this is the right moment to sell this firm? And why would somebody buy it? Like having a really clear idea, like, and I think we'll get into like, does it fit into somebody else's thing, or does it expand them, or what is it about my firm that makes it a great target for someone?
What about you, Alan?
Yeah, I would, I would add a couple of that. It's hard to beat that first answer, but I would say a couple more things. One is immediately, if you're serious about it, surround yourself with many advisors, really, don't assume you have all the answers. Uh, get a lot of people, a lot of input from lots of folks. And that's not always easy for founders who built their business a certain way. But the best ones I've seen, the founder of Nexium included, surrounds themselves with many advisors. Many of these businesses don't have a board to tap into for advice. And so the external informal board of advisors becomes critical. And then the next thing is just understand that when you make that move and you go down that path, you're going to be distracted by that process, by the work. And so as much as possible, ask yourself, do you have a team that can run the business or most of it while you're focusing on selling it? Because if you don't, it's really you're going to hurt your business in the process. And it's going to look like you're making a bunch of empty promises to the future buyer because you're promising a sales pipeline and a durability of the business that might be falling off a bit while you're distracted selling the company. So I think surrounding yourself with many advisors first, and then second, making sure that you've got a great team in place. There's a company right now that we're in negotiations with that has gone through a lot of trouble to make sure the founder has that there's a strong team in place so that he can be out with us, in the proverbial dating process pre-LOI to meet with us and know that the thing's not going to fall apart behind him, and that's really evident in the conversations that we've had with them. And it's really obvious when it's not there.
Mm. Can imagine it'd be a pretty consuming exercise. And if you haven't got a strong team in place to run your business while you're in that process, you could get consumed pretty quickly.
Yeah, I think so. I think certainly at Nexient, Mark, we worked really hard to make sure that we minimize the number of people that were distracted by 6 months of work, you know?
Yeah, I think we had a fantastic team in place that allowed me to spend most of my waking hours on the transaction, and the business kept going.
I want to pull on that thread a little bit, Alan. I know in our discussions prior to the session today, you talked a little bit about puzzle pieces and platforms, and I think that links to what Mark was just saying there. Can you expand on what's a puzzle piece and what's a platform, and how does that relate to M&A activity?
Well, that's a term that we have come up with at Koniag Capital. I don't know how universally it's used, but for us, a puzzle piece business that we would look to acquire is maybe $500,000 in EBITDA to a couple million EBITDA, has one service line. So that's in PE language or M&A language, that would be considered subscale. When you're talking about a subscale business that hasn't figured out a way to really mature and grow with a team nationally or across practice lines or something. Let's say it's a Salesforce partner that does just Salesforce work, or an Uncorked partner that just does Uncorked work. It could be subscale, but with that revenue level, which means it's heavily reliant on the founder or heavily reliant on a small team to drive sales and delivery. And those puzzle piece businesses are oftentimes better off being tucked inside of an existing business. So for us, we would look at a puzzle piece business as having an eventual destination site, Vervent, for example, in our portfolio. And then on the other side of it, a platform business is, 5 to 15 million in EBITDA that has multiple lines of business and a durable team that has scaled over years and can stand on its own. And so that platform business would sit adjacent to other businesses that we're building out in our portfolio. So I think really understanding our place in the world and our business and what we bring to bear into the market, and what the seller brings to bear in the market, in simple terms like that, puzzle piece or platform, can be helpful. And it also helps, I think, shape expectations around valuations on multiples of revenue versus multiples of EBITDA and those kind of things, especially now that the heyday is over of 2020 and 2021, when valuations were, looking back now, perhaps higher than they should have been. And I think that's come down to earth again. And we're facing valuations that everybody's still adjusting to, I think, out there, in terms of founders who might have gotten an offer during that peak and are wondering where those offers went. They're gone with the way of free money. When free money went away, that went away. So those are the kinds of things that we think about, certainly at Koniag Capital, me and the team, in terms of and the guidance that we get from the holding company and my boss, Ron, the chairman of Koniag. We think about these puzzle pieces versus platform businesses in that way. I hope that helps.
Absolutely. Just a quick note to John. I saw your question or comment there, John. We'll get to that in the Q&A section. Thanks for that. Feel free, anyone else, to pop those through as we go. One more question before we move into our second section. For those, a slightly smaller audience in our group here, but Mark and Alan, what's the biggest mistake someone planning to buy a firm could make?
I've got one.
Do you want me to go first, Mark?
Sure.
I'm
Yeah, go
happy
ahead.
to. I'm happy to. Having been on the sell side several times, the biggest one of which was with Mark and I in the team that we had right at Nexient. But I think about what Bill McDermott said. He was a guest speaker of ours at a client event, and someone asked him point blank, what do you recommend a CEO of a large company do to ensure you don't break the businesses you bought? That's the question they asked Bill McDermott, who's the CEO of ServiceNow currently, but he was answering it from the frame of having been the North American CEO of SAP, I believe. So he said three things. He said, one, CEO to CEO. So no matter how big no matter how big the buying company is, the CEO simply must get involved no matter what the size of the acquiring company is that you're buying. He simply must go build trusting relationships. He went on to talk about the fact that he still had those founders of those businesses that he bought at SAP over to his house for dinner. He went all in as the CEO of that business to build tight relationships. He said, number two, keep your promises, on both sides, right? So if you promise to let them run separately for a long period of time, keep your promise, which leads to number three, which is, really have a pragmatic approach on the buy side. So you have different pockets that where a business can fit in. He was emphatic about some businesses should be left to run alone, some should be forcibly integrated into the larger organization, and situational awareness of that and having the intestinal fortitude as the CEO of the larger company to force that into the team you've got on the buy side becomes really critical. And if that's not done, you're going to break the business, or your odds go way up of breaking the business. But those are the three things that Bill said that'll always stick with me, and we carry around now as critical criteria for us at Koniag Capital.
Anything to add to that,
I
Mark?
love that. Yeah, great. I'm going to go a little deeper into like tactics, but it gets at something which is at the heart of the deal, which is the earnout. And so quite often when buyer and seller are trying to agree on terms, you come up with this idea of we'll give you X dollars today, cash or stock, and then if you and your company perform for 2 years or 3 years, we'll give you Y more dollars. So it's considered an earnout. And it sort of assumes that you can independently measure the results of the firm that got acquired. But most of the time, the reason you're buying a firm is to integrate them into whatever you've got. So they're more likely a puzzle piece, and you're going to integrate them into your platform. And if you do it really well, they probably don't exist as a standalone entity for 3 more years. So now you get into this weird situation. This happened to us where we had an earnout for 2 years. And at the end of year one, we integrated Nexient and four other companies, which also had earnouts, into a new thing called Launch. And so we blurred the lines. We didn't have Nexient anymore as a separate thing. And Launch together would pursue clients and pursue growth. And every month I would get this file from our finance group that would say, here are the results for Nexient and each of the other four startups that got bought and rolled into it. And I was like, how do you even come up with these numbers? They don't exist anymore. And they would have this really like precise measurement of how we had done as a separate group. But so anyway, it was really a mismatch in terms of like our expectations of what we were hoping to get out of the deal, and then like what the reality of it was, and how we actually should have been incented to operate together. So it was kind of ultimately a mismatch on alignment of getting us to be incented to do what the acquiring firm wanted. Um, yeah, so I would say be very clear about earnout because that is such a core part of the deal. It's crucial to the people that are selling the firm. And if it doesn't really align with how you're going to run things after the deal, then it's going to be a mess.
Nice. Super interesting. All right, that brings us to the end of our first section, and we'll roll into the second now where we do a live workshop. This is going to be fun. Some good questions coming through. Keep those coming, team. We'll get to those in the Q&A after this. All right, Mark, Alan, it's time to workshop that real M&A problem. I'll pass this to you, Mark, to set the scene, and we'll get into it.
Yes, and first off, thank you to Johan from EPM Projects who submitted the problem we're going to work on today. So what he's framed for us is a challenge where he's had a number of times where he is looking to acquire smaller firms and add them into his firm. And the way it has played out is he gets sort of agreement with these smaller firms generally to do an acquisition. And then they, as Alan said, they get into sort of this dating process where they're getting to know each other better. They're doing some diligence. I imagine Johan's asking for lots of information. The smaller firm doesn't really have great systems and great data, so they struggle to produce the information. And over a period of months, the deal can fizzle. And that's happened several times now. So he's asking us sort of, how do I stop this from happening? And how do I get the deal to stick all the way through? So one of the things, this is, episode one, I think as a kind of an approach for Alan and I in this case, I think we want to ask some questions and sort of genericize Johan's challenge just to make sure that we're making it applicable to a broader audience. So we'll make some assumptions about it rather than getting Johan to give us the exact details. We'll sort of say, here are a few assumptions we're making. And for me, I'm about to ask you this as well, on, but for me, like one of the first things I wonder is, does Johan have an investment banker working with him as a buy-side banker that's sort of setting up the structure and setting up potential agreements with them? I don't know, Alan, what questions or assumptions you've got about this problem.
Yeah, I think certainly having a banker is critical. It goes back to um, the other point would be if you're trying to do non-cash transactions, it has to be really compelling. Otherwise, the twinkle in everybody's eye on the sell side is going to, drift off pretty quickly. And then you can end up in endless debates about the valuation of the stock. And then it just becomes, um, a fizzle, right? And so the question I would have is, are you really willing to change the game here and use some debt and use some cash in combination to really lure in a seller of a business so that they can actually take some chips off the table as a part of the process?
Yeah, makes sense. So one of the first things that comes to mind for me is looking at my own experience. I think when you're running a firm, you're always curious, what is my firm worth? Would there be a buyer? And if so, how much would they pay? And the only way to really answer that question is when somebody like Johan calls to pursue the process, right? And so we did this several times. Most notably, we did this in 2019 at Nexient, where we had inbound interest from actually three different firms. It was a firm based in France, a firm based in Italy, and a private equity firm based in the US. And so, without hiring an investment banker, the team and I pursued this, and we went pretty far down the road to see what see what their interest level was, see what the model would be, and ultimately we wanted to get like what would they offer us in terms of cash or stock or earnout or what would it be. We got to the end, and actually, I thought we might do this deal. We got two offers. One was quite compelling, and it offered us a big chunk of cash up front, and then an equally large chunk of cash in an earnout, which at that point I didn't really know much about earnouts. And in my head, as the seller, I looked at the earnout and counted that we would get roughly 100% of it because I figured we were going to execute, and of course, we'd get that. Um, and then ultimately, both deals fell apart because our owner and board, our majority owner and our board felt that while the combined price might be pretty close to the value of the company, they were only viewing it as the first half that was guaranteed. And their perspective was the moment we sell, we as a board lose control. You guys might or might not get that second half through the earnout, but we're just going to hear about it later and we have no influence over it. So they were viewing the deal as half of the value as what I was viewing the deal. Truth is probably somewhere in the middle. And so we ended up, after 6 months, the deal fizzled and we did not sell the company. So I'm guessing for Johan, this is something like this is happening, right? Like there's kind of two things in what happened with us. One, there's just we were curious, like what are we worth? And it took us 6 months to figure that out, and we got a very crisp answer from the market. And then even with that answer, like are we internally even aligned? I didn't know how unaligned we were. I thought with the price we got to at the end, our board would be in favor and we would move forward. And I learned, as much as the buyers learned, that we weren't, and the deal fizzled. So Yeah, that's kind of one take. Alan, maybe I'll turn over to you for some takes, and then maybe
Yeah.
we can come back and talk about what constructively we could offer Johan to do differently.
Yeah, I think if Johan is serious about this, aside from the points that we're making here around a banker, if the team he and his whatever team he has is intent on doing it themselves, I do know that at Koniag before I got here, that the team would go and with a checklist in a non-competitive situation and guide the potential seller through the process intentionally and be very prescriptive about and even help with creating some of the pre-diligence and diligence documents, enabling the small business to uh, handle the request for information in the data room and all that to run down the field and even come up with a valuation, right? So if Johan is serious about it, maybe he needs to beef up his team to be able to come up with a full-blown checklist to be able to bring to a potential seller and walk them through the process and keep a pace and say, here's the schedule and so on, versus relying on a banker. Play the banker themselves is what I'm saying. Play the intermediary
Mm.
themselves and enable the process and have other skills available, CPAs and lawyers and so on, such as what Koniag Capital has had in the past, again, before I got here to help a small business prop themselves up, not prop themselves up, but be ready to sell. So that's
Yeah.
just another idea that occurred to me while you were talking.
Very
Yeah,
cool.
interesting. So one thing I would suggest to Johan is to, as much as possible, bring the deal terms to the beginning.
Mm.
So
Hmm.
try to come
Yeah,
up
that's a good
with,
one.
and my analogy is like when you buy a home, you agree upon a price, and then at least in our market, you can then quite often say, but I'm going to have an inspector come and they're going to look at everything. And if they find something major, then I'm going to come back to you and say, I want to change the price, right? So to the extent you could say, here's the deal, here's the structure of the deal, here's the amount of money, the amount of stock, the amount of the earnout, and bring that at the very beginning, then if you've got the two problems that we had, one, I was just curious what we were worth, and two, I learned later that my board and I weren't even really aligned. You'd expose both of those earlier. So you
Hmm.
ideally,
That's
it
good.
doesn't mean that the deal won't fizzle, but it'll fizzle a lot faster, and you won't waste
Mm.
2 or 3 months chasing the company for diligence. And if they do see the terms and like them and agree, I think they'll be more motivated to get the diligence done, right? And so you're more likely for whoever does agree
Yeah.
to that actually will work with you. And maybe throwing what Alan was saying is that if they do agree to the terms and they're quite likely not sophisticated enough to have all of this in place, maybe you can help them get it in place. Maybe you have a team that helps them build the deck or build the information they need. Um, yeah. So I don't know, Alan, what you
Right.
want to?
That's great. Yeah. I mean, even educating on what a data room is, right? Like, we have to have a secure place to put this stuff. And here's
Yeah.
the things that we need to work with you on. And we have an accountant on staff to help you, CPA on staff to help you with this. And a lawyer, if you want that kind of help, you can, and encourage it, nudge it forward if Johan's serious about this and not wanting to use a banker.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good. And I love your point about deal terms up front. Just like anything else, the more straight talk you can have about that, it can short circuit a lot of wasted time.
That feels like the key thing, right? To draw that conversation out into the very front, save yourself a heap of time,
Agreed.
probably a lot of effort that otherwise could consume you for very little return, ultimately. All
Yeah.
right, we're going to flow from here quite naturally into a few questions. We've had a few come through as we go. I was going to bring John off mute and share his question, but I can't see him in the attendee list any further. So I'll just read this one out. Please, Mark Allen, could you comment on assessing the culture fit and the work to merge the cultures of acquire and acquired? I imagine that relates to your point, Mark, of ensuring that things will be successful after the deal is complete. If the cultures can't come together, things could fall apart.
Yeah. That is, and at the core of it, we're talking about businesses which are really people, right? They have tools, they have processes, but they're at their core people. So if you don't get the cultures of the two organizations to fit together, it will fall apart and you'll lose all the key people. I think and I think Alan can speak to this potentially better than me, but I think a lot of what Alan's been chatting about is this idea of really deeply understanding who the founder is and who the team is and what's important to them, and seeing if that aligns with what's important to you. What is their mission? What is your mission? Do they fit together? And why do they want to sell? Are they looking to sell to get out? Are they looking to sell to do less admin and more client work? What's driving them? I don't know, Alan, I know you've thought about this one
Yeah,
quite
yeah,
a
a
bit.
bunch, right? Certainly, and I think that you nailed it. I would say that it's interesting. There's two things in the chat here. One's John's question. Hi, John. Um, and Brian's subsequent question, Urkula's, and they're connected, I think, because uh, culture is embedded in sales motions, um, messaging, um, uh, clients, right? Therein lies the culture of the business you want to buy and your own business that as the acquirer. Um, and I think that again, I think that starts to inform as much as possible during due diligence. I think John's question is how in the world do you size this up in the acquisition process, especially if it's competitive and everybody wants to get the deal done fast because time kills all deals and you've got a month to do due diligence that's all encompassing. How do you size up the culture? And my answer to that is number one, it's really hard to. Number two, you're using some lightweight tools to try to do that. And number three, the best thing to do is buy the business and let it stand alone for a while to mitigate that risk so that you can then size up the culture afterwards a little bit more deeply before really locking it into a puzzle piece or a platform, right? And so I do know that listening to Hugh MacArthur, the chairman of Bain, and his podcast called Dry Powder, PE firms are starting to try to perfect this more and more. Maybe not the PE firm that I know, but other PE firms that are world class are trying to really dig in and understand the management teams, doing full blown psych assessments of the team, full blown analysis of the culture using outside tools. Heather and I went to an M&A conference here in Minneapolis a while back, and there are executives that you can hire to bring in to assess the culture of the organization, do full-blown surveys, and really get into it. And depending on how much you're spending on the asset, I'd encourage some of that experimentation to figure out what works for you. Mark, I don't know
I've got
if that's
a bit of
where
a
you're
yeah, I've
going.
got a bit of a controversial thing I want to throw in here. So, when I left NTT, we had created Launch by NTT Data, which was this merged thing, and we were doing a search to replace me. And so I got to meet a lot of people that were in interesting leadership positions in large consulting firms, and one of which
Yeah.
was Accenture Song, and they had rolled up more than 40 acquisitions. And I got to meet several people who were at the top level of Song. And so it was fascinating to me. One of them, I asked them all about this, like, how do you make all these acquisitions work? And like, we've struggled with certain things, and particularly the culture and getting them together. One of the people looked at me and said, the founder must go. Like, this is one of my rules I've decided after doing this many times. We buy the firm, the founder leaves.
Yeah.
And it was a fascinating take on it because we did the opposite at NTT. We kept the founder, we let them run independently. And then somewhere around 18 months in, the founder, who by definition is somebody who's sort of like slightly dissatisfied with the world and optimistic that they can make it better and doesn't particularly like having a boss and wants to do everything themselves and move really quickly.
No idea what you're talking
They're
about here.
now 18 months into working in a much larger organization. They're no longer the boss. They have to ask for permission for everything. They get grumpy. And before they leave, they make everyone else grumpy. So this guy's theory was the founder must go. And he got to
Yeah.
the point where he believed it so strongly that was part of the playbook when he oversaw an acquisition. I thought it was fascinating. I'm curious your take on that.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. I'm a pragmatist, and I think one of the roads to hell is paved with dogma. So I avoid absolutes like that, but I
mhm,
think I do think um again, back to the dating process and the engagement process, meaning pre-LOI and then LOI. I do think some heart-to-heart conversations and some real conversations in that process with the founder can be helpful, very, very helpful, in terms of candid discussions about what this means, what the 1 to 2 year window looks like, and what the real plan is there together, even if it's a confidential plan for 1 to 2 years, to really be clear about that together and what that succession plan is going to likely look like, versus dancing around that and pretending is at least important. So maybe someday, Mark, I'll become as dogmatic as the person you're talking about. But right now I'm either dumb enough or naive enough or smart enough to keep it open, the switch open. But I do think you're also correct that founders, again, this is if they have 2 children, this is their 3rd child, right? So this is deeply personal to them. And so sometimes there's an over rotation on what's important and what's not for the business.
I'm going to jump in here with space for one final question before we look to conclude the session today. I actually really liked your one, Jamie, and perhaps if you're willing to jump off mute there, and that should allow you now to share your question with Mark and Alan directly.
Sure. So as you have, well, first of all, hi, gentlemen. Thank you for your time today. As you all are evaluating companies to purchase, what are your no regrets blockers? Like, besides the obvious, right? We know profitability and pipeline and all of that have to exist. But what are the blockers that when you see these crimson flags, it's a hard pass? Just nope. And then on the outside, looking outside, what market motions do you read, again, besides just pure supply and demand? Like as far as forecasting, I'm an Amy Webb fan, so strategic foresight comes to mind. I'm curious what that outside in and inside out motion is for you.
Do you want to go first, Alan?
So the red flags, the bright red flags that are non-starters, Jamie, that's your question, I assume, if I've got it right. And I think about certainly for us at Koniag Capital, if there's a like 95% customer concentration or something like that, it's pretty hard to overcome that, or something crazy like that really is really hard to think about how you're going to help that business grow off of one customer. That's tough. Then I do think, at least for my sensibility and our sensibility at Koniag Capital, I think about, Patrick Lencioni's hungry, humble, and smart, right? Like people really have to come at it from those 3 perspectives. And if there's an enormous, I don't know, ego that's a part of it, that's why we titled this thing Egos and Exits, right? So at least for us and our sensibility, if there's a massive over rotation on the ego of the founder, then we'll just walk. That's just going to set us up for all of us for a lot of pain and suffering for years to come.
Yeah, I think great answer. I think I would just add to that. It feels like the market for a lot of things is changing incredibly rapidly, even more so than a year ago or 2 years ago, with all the AI tools and just all the different solutions coming into pretty much every space out there. So I would look at the firm and what they do and sort of how defensible is it, how likely is it to get disrupted itself in the next year, 2 years, 3 years. And if there is a high risk of that, it's sort of a similar thing to what Alan's saying with a high concentration with one client. If they've got a high concentration on one motion or one solution or one service offering, and it feels like the market's about to potentially obliterate that as something valuable, that would be a red flag for me. Just really want to see that they've got some resilience against the market and ideally a diversified set of offerings.
Yeah, we have found, to add to that answer in terms of how do we get strategic foresight? We decided to invest with Gartner to help us with that. They've been quite helpful in us segmenting the TAM, understanding where things are going around AI-driven services, for or even specific industries we'll end up buying our way into where we don't have an industry concentration today. We want to get into that industry. What's the future of tech services in that industry segment? And that's been very helpful to us. Gardner Forrester, those kinds of things. I know, Mark, even on the sell side, we had good success leveraging Gardner to get our name out there throughout our 5 years together.
Yep.
Nice one. Great question, Jamie. And for those of you that shared a few comments or questions which we didn't get to, we'll try and cover those, as many of those as possible in our summary from an email from Mark following today's session. That brings us pretty close towards the end. Mark, Alan, any kind of final thoughts or single pieces of advice? What's the one thing that you want the group here to take away if they're in the process of buying or selling a firm?
Yeah, I can take it from the perspective of selling and from the perspective of leading a firm. And I'd say the one thing would be understand the landscape and think of it as a multi-year project. I took over Nexian at the end of 2014. I started getting calls from investment bankers in 2015 and 2016. I took them all. I chatted with them. I honestly, at that point, had no idea what I was talking about. I had no idea how M&A worked, and I was just curious to learn from them. And so over the years, I would learn about the process. I would learn what they were looking for. I would learn what our competitors are doing. For whatever reason, bankers would love to tell me about our competitors. So I would always try to get more information about that. So yeah, I would just say understand the landscape, know where you stand in it, and then that will help you develop like why would somebody buy my firm? And do I have a strong case or a weak case? Yeah, Alan, what's your one takeaway?
Yeah, on the buy side, I certainly like Brian's list there of things to think about in terms of watch items. That's a great list, Brian. Thank you. I think for us, it's not dissimilar on the buy side. Mark, you and I talked about when you're just driving organic growth, you got to kiss a lot of frogs.
Hmm.
On the buy side, we've adopted a similar approach. The team and I always take the meeting. If it's a bad fit, shorten the meeting, right? Once you've had it, once you're in the meeting, shorten it. But always take the meeting because you never know what you're going to learn. And if you try to apply too much left-brained intellect to it beforehand, you won't take the meeting and you'll miss the opportunity.
Nice one. Mark, over to you to wrap things up.
Well, thank you everybody for joining episode 1. Hopefully you enjoyed it. For me, it's been great just catching up with Alan and Jacob and talking about this. Lots of great questions. And thank you to Johan for the question in the middle there. I love this concept of kind of workshopping something in real time. So keep zigging and zagging, and we'll hopefully see you in 2 weeks.